Okay, so he says again, Vihine has aras and ikram kutzim. So he went through kutzim, saros, kutzim, and neimim, or nimim and kutzim, whichever how you count. Shehem mochen de iver, yotzim betechila, v'chein hem arucha v'nimshachim ad achazadazah. Now that's where we're at right now in the Tiva Gavanos, and let's come over here. And we're on here. As they go down these kutzim, they're longer hairs. They come from the embryonic stage. They read to that place. Since the nook is at that place. So since they reached there, they hit her. Shehem Ma'aras HaMochim, and so what is this coming from? Shehem Ma'aras HaMochim, the Ibor. There are a radiance that is coming from the Mochin, the Ibor HaNikros Nefesh. V'hatim Bevar as Inyan as Aras HaNikros Nimim, Shehem Boim Ma'aras HaMochim, the Yanika HaNikros Ruach. Now he doesn't describe how it is that they come there. I mean, for sure, I'm not sure, through the hairs. He said, but it's a ha'ara that comes from these hairs. His words are shehem boim. They are as okay. Let's go on. It says va'acher kach ka'asher hazahu bizmani yanika. And then he was at the yanika stage. Shahaz chom b'kabel tzemochin the yanika hanikros ruach. So now he's out of the womb. So the first part is a radiance that's coming from these hairs while it's in the womb. Now it's out of the womb. Also, that is Zeranpin. So the Mochin themselves are shining. Something Aros Acheris is another set of hairs. Aros and Nikros Kutzim amongst the Saros, which are called Kutzim. Shemas Aros Abechinach Rishon. So there's Kutzim, and now we're Nimim. So these are the nimim. Also, is where the nimin come from that time. Now it's a radiance. I'm not sure. It's a radiance from this stage of life as their unbid. That somehow, and he's not describing exactly how these hairs work. He said, but that the hairs have this radiance that come from, and they go different places. So he said, so that's after the time of Iber, Shabo Yotzer B'Chidus HaKotzim. So the Ficha B'Nimin Yotzer B'Reisha D'Zara B'Zman Yanika, so they go out at that time. They're Konsarim in a Kutza D'Zman HaIver, they're shorter than the ones at the time of the Iver, which indicates that as the longer they're around, the more they grow. Over his Pashtus and the Mata, Haim sulking rock out the Goran to Zabilva, they only go to Zah's throat, below the Mata Bisham Kamacha Kutzim. Bisham, when you come to the throat, Begaran the Zer Anpin, on the back of that, Magian and Nimin ad Rosha Hanukva El Yondiza. Now here he says that the Nimin actually reach her head. Okay? Which is not just a radiance, but it's reaching her head. So, but I guess it's the same thing is true with the kotzim. So this is the upper nukva of Zer Anpin, which is Leah. So there's an aspect of his hairs that reach her. Bir Idrazuta, Bir Harav. So in the Idrazuta, the Rav explains as an Inyan ba'ofen acher. Now he says, Lezman Ivor shall Shani de Godless. So in other words, when he comes and he starts going into expanded consciousness, Sha'azhu Makabel Mochin de Godless, then he receives the Mochin de Godless. Also, Somchim Ben the Kotzim V'Ranimin Saros Acheros Shahim and Nikrim Saros. Now there's another set of hairs that grow at this point. So this is the third point. He says, so he says again, directly the words, these are the words grow from a ha'ara that comes from the mochin de gadlus. So it's like these coming into you, they're shining in some way. I'm not sure, inside the head, shining out. וכיוון שהשערות חלדוך ביוצא בזמן מאוחר מן הבחינס השערות וקוצים. So now it's coming, I think this is a min hasaros the kutzim benimim. So since these hairs are longer, or excuse me, are just coming out now, they're the latest between the kutzim and the nimim. So therefore the saros come to Zah, the situation where he is, he's an adult, he is adult. Okay, back. So since they don't have that much time to grow, and so therefore they're going to be shorter, and also from these nimin, that's the middle set, so that's what that happens. So since they're short, bechinas as aros, they're only on the skull. Which is the shortest area of all. So these hairs so these hairs really are for the purpose of Zer Anpin only, and they're radiated in some way as a result of the stage that he's in. He's not giving something to someone else. According to what we're learning here, that the order of the bedregos of the hairs is from down, going from up to from below to up above. The height of the first one is kutzim. So that's the first time. This is the first set of hairs. Then there's nimin, and sa'ara gadlus. Moving on, he said, excuse me, maybe the Marachul Drush Acher, he wants to say another shita chufulcha, something opposite of that. He wants to say something different. The shita zu, according to this new shita, then the kutzim would be the highest level. So he said, "He medrega rishona." So now he gets more detail on this. He come out of their anpin's chochma, which is the highest level. He says the chochma they're talking about in the womb. It says that the chochma is able to radiate out and produce these hairs. But they're in a lower level. There's a second one, from his bina, which is lessened. So when we come to the sa'aros, this is the least of them. This is the third level. Which is the muach hadas, which is less than the other two. So he says. It's interesting that the highest level is really at the most embryonic stage, at the very beginning. Rather than I would think the other way around, is that the muach gadlus would be the stronger of all of them. So they have, of course, the das has chasadim megaboros in it. But Tevis nima he oda begematria kuf. So we added that up. It doesn't add up exactly. So it has one number left over, who mispach hakoilo, which is the count of the koilo. And I haven't seen him do that, the Rab do that exactly previously, but he does it here. So what we have is like this: a he gematria kuf. And what to say the word nima means kuf. But who sewed shem kavayad the milu isad. So how does that work out? It's the milui of sag. It's really the chavaya of the milui of sag. Ad osius and milui the chavaya the sag, which kasher tosir mehem es osius ha'havaya, so remove the chavaya b'shuta shehem b'minyan ko. If yishar v'rak osius ha'milui, then you only have the letters of the milui left. Ozheim olim b'gematria lamed zayin. So now he says, because Tetzares Sag, Shuhu Chavaya B'Milui Sag, Im Laz, which is Osius Amilui the Chavaya the Sag, which is its Milui, below Osius B'Shutos, Harehem Olam B'Yachad Kuf, Communion Nima, like the word Nima. Ve'hein so Nima Shazehu B'Chinas Nimim Shalzah, this is the concept of the Nimim of Zer Anpin. So he says, then we have a couple of more. He says, the milui sag he bebina. So we understand that this is teaching you that this is coming from bina. So that we would say this, it represents bina. It ties up with what he said previously. Yotzim b'muach habina, they come from the muach habina shesham chavaya the sag, which is where you find the chavaya, which is called sag she'im melua shuhilaz. Then it comes to the count of kuf. So kuf is the pedimius, so the concept of the nima, and the nima goes with that middle section. He said, "Umarchu kosev shalosh shema merav ech lekasher hasashita zu im shita kodemes shekosev kodem dechem." So he doesn't really know how you put this together with what we heard before. But I had that question. I thought it was a question of exactly when he says that the radiance is coming out of those stages, how in fact as it gets translated into the hairs. So that will seem to be missing to me. So anyway, let's go to the next one. We'll read across the top, and it says like this. Let's see if we can read through it. V'nachsa the Inyan Rishon. So let's go back to the first Inyan. V'hu ha'talis ba'atzma rabeshach b'tzitzis yosim b'menu. So we're just talking about the talis. But the tzitzis hang down from it. Huba bechinas or makif al kol za kulo. So this is the concept of the big makif. It's makif the entire za. Ad siyam hayisod shabo. And it wants to even say that it goes down to the yisod. I'm not sure why it specifies that, but it means to the bottom. V'tocha zecha b'makif agadol. And in the midst of this, inside of it, Yesh or makif katmimena. There's another or makif which is less than it. So this is like the lam and the mem and the mem of the tzat of the tzelon, or of the lechem ubesochu. So therefore, it's inside of the big one. V'gam hu makif ezah. It also surrounds that. Elish ein makif lo barak l'shlosh rishon rishon l'shalom, but it only resfies him, only his chabad. It only covers over his head, the top of his head. V'hi bechinas ha'aros and his karim. So this is the hairs that we were talking about. Asher sodom ku b'techila or penimi shenekta bezah. That. So I'm trying to trace this down. He says that where does these hairs come from? Their secret is that they begin from an or panimi that came into Zah. Now, is he talking about this strand that's coming from Eric Anpin and that's banging around, bangs the head of Zer Anpin and comes inside of it and it produces light on the other side? I'm not sure what he meant by hu b'techilach or panimi sheneknas that came into Zah, v'choyze v'ola b'mata l'mala, and then it starts going upwards. Barosha, bebechinas aros, or makiv saviv the rosh bebechutz, and they surround the head all the way around. The chein elochas aros the mocha the gadlus the ratio the zer anpen heim ketzarim. So therefore, since these are coming out like this, they're going to be very short. V'heim zekufim, but they're also upright. Mu'umid, they're standing up. V'heinu kufufim teluyim, and they're not bent over and hanging down. Because if that was the case, and they were going to be hanging down and going downwards, then you would find that the makif was below the level of the skull. But since they're standing up, it's like having a crew cut. Or like a flat top. They used to have a haircut called flat top. They would surround their head, until it reaches the head of Zer Anpin. ואמנם בחינה זרע במקיף וקטנה בנימי ונמשך גם מן הנימן דזמן יניקה. So once again he says this makif that we're talking about, the little one, there's also, it's a little difficult, the construction of the sentence, but he says that also this same concept applies to the nimim dizman yanika. So there we were talking about the niming at the time of the sa'aras at the time of I assume, the time of godless. So we already said that this spreads down into the head of Leah, which is at the Goren of Zah. So now this Inyan that we were talking about, which is the kutzim that start out at the time of the Eber, they go further down. Beresha the Nuk, and they wind up going over to the head, to the top of the head of the Nuk Tachtaina, Hanikras Rachel. So now he's identified, he says a Nuk above and a Nuk down below. So the tzitzit. So this name, the Bechina Zu, that is the kutzim, that's the secret of the tzitzit. He calls them tzitzit. Hayotzes v'nislos min atalis, that come out, they hang down from the talis. Shuha makif elyon, which is the upper makif. Hachitzon akolu kol rosho v'gufu dezah, which includes all the entire. The big one is the whole zah. Ad siyam yisod. Once again, he says the phrase ad siyam yisod because I'm thinking in my own mind that the bottom level would be the netzach and hod because they reach the ground. But he didn't look at it that way because he just looks at it. That's how he looks, I guess, in terms of where their origin is. Okay, we still got a couple of minutes, right?
Yeah.
Ad siyam yisod shebel kaniska the el, as it mentioned up above. Of a common kamasha as we're going to get into this with God's help. This is what the Idris Neso said. Kad isberi partzufa the bereisha the nukva, when the partzufa begins at the place, I guess, of the head of the nukva, talia chad kutza des ARI ma'achre zizah. So right at that place at the beginning, that's where this kutza, this ARI reaches, vataloi ad reisha the nukva, and it reaches the reisha the nukva. And once again, this is the embryonic hair that's going down there. Let's see if we could do a little bit of the tiv, starting on number Kuf Tes Zion, which is down at the bottom of this page, page Kuf Samak Vav. So it says, Va'ata rabamamshik arav levoyer es inyan atzitzis lefi hashita rishayna. Shakutzim heim b'mochen de ivor, v'chanimim heim b'mochen de yanika, v'chasa'aras heim b'mochen de gadlus. Di'ra talis atzvach v'shuch etzim beget. Let's face it, asher hatzitzios yotzerem in the talis hazuh shuhu abeget, ubol toluyos hatzitzios, shazera bebeget shuhu hatalis, whom is the or hamakiv al call parts of Hadazah. So he wants to say this is that makif goes every place. Ba'ofen shu makif is called chazera ba'ad siyam b'yisod shabo shihas sphera achrona shabo, which is his last sphere, he says. But b'nimios ha'talis, shehi makif, that inside of that talis agadol, yesh or makif shu katan mina or ha'makif shalatalis, is a smaller light there. V'kevin shu or ha'makif, and since it's a makif, cotton, it's small cotton, minachtalis, the fichochu nimsa bifnim besochatalis. So therefore, it's inside of that. That's like the concept that the lamed is really inside of the mem. He says, or you could say the other way. What's the other way to say that chaya is inside of yechida? And this is the order in the Oris and Makif, really the greatest one, it surrounds all around, on outside. It's a little one, so it's inside of it. I guess we'll stop right here unless I have any more time.
That's good.
Thank you very much, Rabbi, for learning with me. Okay, call to.